Welcome back to the TV podcast on the Incomparable. Tonight we are continuing our Farscape rewatch. This time we're covering Season 1, Episode 3, Exodus from Genesis, and Season 1, Episode 4, Throne for a Loss. And just a reminder, if you're new to this podcast or if you just forgot from last time, we're doing the Wikipedia episode order for Season 1, not the Amazon Prime order. Amazon Prime is doing the air date, whereas the Wikipedia is the production date when the shows were produced and finished. I'm your host, Eric Scott, and joining me tonight again is my fellow co host, who I don't think is a DNA clone replica, Jason Johnson.
See, this is the part where I was going to just stay silent and pretend I was a silent replica, but that really doesn't translate well to a podcast. So thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
Yeah, a podcast of just one person talking, probably not really going to go very far.
No, and nobody can see me sitting here being quiet, so it's kind of pointless, right?
Yeah, the audio doesn't do the video any justice. All right, so tonight, like we said, we're going to do episodes 3 and 4. So let's get into episode 3, Exodus from Genesis. So we open with some scenes about life on board Moya. Rigel's painting a soft portrait, which really isn't very realistic, and also chewing and eating some of the food there too. Crichton's arguing with Dargo about wanting to brush his teeth. Dargo stuffs a small white creature called a dentic into John's mouth and says it eats bacteria and food debris. John's a little surprised at first, and eventually kind of says it's got a nice little minty taste. But then Dargo warns him never to swallow it, which I guess could be kind of bad. Suddenly, Moya comes to an abrupt halt as it comes upon what looks like some kind of asteroid debris field. Going up to the bridge, Aeryn spots a Peacekeeper scout ship called the Marauder on the far side of the debris, which is keeping Moya hidden from view. The Marauder stops scanning eventually and moves off, leaving our crew safe for now. Or are they? And then later we see part of the debris cloud that looks like small insects infiltrating Moya's landing bay. Later, in a different maintenance bay, Aeryn's working along with John. She tells John that they were lucky to avoid the Marauder, whose crew are called Commandos. And we learn that Aeryn was going to be a commando, but before she could be reassigned, she met Crichton, and now here she is. Back in Rigel's quarters, Zan stops by to help him clean up from Moya's sudden stop. She uses Rigel's paint to enhance his painting by making what she calls a spirit painting of the Dominar. Rigel's pleased and says the painting reminds him of his ancestor, Rigel I, whom he greatly admired. Back in the maintenance bay, Aeryn's complaining that it's getting hot. Dargo contacts them to report the same thing. John checks a nearby control panel and confirms that the temperature is rising. As Aeryn bends down to pick up a tool, she gets shot in the hand by some kind of needle-like dart that one of the invading bug-like creatures shoots from itself. She assumes it's just a metal splinter and pulls it out and throws it away. And as she and Crichton leave the maintenance bay, the creature retrieves its dart with her blood on it. Back on the command deck, Aeryn and Dargo discover that there's a blockage in the vents, preventing Moya's heat from discharging into space. And it's just going to keep building up and being very bad for everybody. So the crew splits up to try to find a way to release the heat buildup. On one of the levels, Crichton and Zan work on closing some of the valves that control the heat. John tells Zan that no matter what he does, Aeryn and Dargo think he's pretty much useless. Zan says they're soldiers and they should try to win their respect by actions, not words. Having figured out how to use the vents controls, John decides to go to their quarters to check on the vents there and close them. In John's quarters, we see another creature removing strands of his hair from one of his combs. John spots the creature and calls the others. They want him to capture it for study and not to get back into the air vents. John eventually manages to capture the creature in a bedsheet and kind of smacks it around a bit to knock it out, but he kind of unfortunately winds up killing it. Taking it to Zan, she discovers some kind of Crichton's DNAs in the creature cells. The crew then discovers an internal door on Moya is sealed with some kind of blue-coated compound that no one can break through. Aeryn's getting more worked up and forgetful. Dargo says she has Sebacean Heat Delirium. Their species cannot deal with extreme thermal temperature increases. Aeryn tells John that she will eventually lose her short-term and long-term memory, entering a state that they call the living death. And then she says that's the only time Sebaceans kill their own out of mercy. Later, Crichton comes across Zan down another corridor, interfering with one of the heat regulator valves. He tries to stop her, but she kind of beats the crap out of him, and then spews that same blue goo over the valve, locking it open, and runs away. John makes his way back up to the command deck and finds Aeryn messing with the console. Pilot warns him to stop her from increasing the temperature further, and John tries to stop her, and you can pretty much guess that, yeah, she beats the crap out of him. Although while fighting, he managed to pull off one of Aeryn's arms, and she falls to the ground just as the real Aeryn shows up. Gathering the crew together, they discuss what to do about these duplicates of them and how to recognize them. They mark themselves with some paint as a way to know who's who. Later, Rigel discovers some kind of nest or hive behind one of the bulkheads and sees one of the creatures emerge from a cocoon. Zan comes up with a liquid that will dissolve the blue goo, but is attacked by one of the creatures and fires a dart into her neck. And we learn that Aeryn is slowly succumbing to the heat delirium, and no one can raise Rigel. Later, John comes face to face with his own duplicate, and apparently the duplicate notices the dab of paint on Crichton's hands and seems to mimic the same thing, and then attacks him. John manages to beat his replica, and then learns also that they can't speak, apparently. Rigel finally comes back online and contacts the others, telling them that more duplicates are being created of the crew. Zan arrives in command and speaks to the crew in a different voice. She says that she's the monarch of the Drak, and threatens to kill Moya's crew for interfering with the Drak's genesis. Crichton tries to play diplomat and talks to the monarch and learns that the Drak live in space, but need heat to birth their young before they return back to space. Doing a little diplomacy, they come to a temporary arrangement that Moya's crew will remain in one room, locked up, and allow Genesis to be completed sooner. Those things can get back to normal and hopefully save Aeryn from her heat delirium. So while they're locked away, that Marauder Peacekeeper Commando group returns and boards Moya. The commandos see what they think is the crew and starts killing them, but really they're the duplicates, not the real crew. John persuades Monarch that the crew is not behind these attacks because they're all locked up in the room. Aeryn can feel the living death approaching, and she asks John to promise to kill her before the end comes. Zan prods Rigel to try to speak to the Monarch in person. He goes down to the nest, and he's granted an audience and goes inside the Drak nest. And after a tense moment where they can't contact him, Monarch again speaks through Zan. She's talked to Rigel and she trusts him. Crichton then tells her he's got an idea how they can defeat the commandos. He wants Monarch to raise the temperature even higher and allow Moya's crew to go free to deal with the commandos. While Zan tries to cool Aeryn with a shower, John and Dargo go after the commandos, who also are suffering the same heat delirium effects that Aeryn is. On the command deck, several duplicates of Crichton surround the commando leader, who manages to attack the real Crichton and hold a knife to his throat. John convinces the soldier that if he kills him, then just another Crichton will take his place. He tells the commando to tell Crace what he saw here and to let Crace know that he picked the wrong species to mess with. The commandos know they're beaten and they're almost dead from the heat delirium, and they leave Moya. Afterwards, John tells Dargo he hopes Crace will leave him alone, but probably not. Pilot reports the temperature's back to normal, and the Draks leave Moya, and Monarch makes a final connection with Zan to thank the crew, and Rigel especially, for helping Genesis to be completed. Later, Crichton's helping Zan to her quarters, and she tells him that he did pretty well, and time and patience will help John adjust to his new life and his new companions. John leaves Zan to rest and winds up on Moya's viewing deck, where Aeryn is. She's feeling better, and she tells him that she used to think lesser life forms were useless, and Crichton kind of realizes that she's actually talking about him. She asks him if he could have kept his promise to kill her before she entered the living death, but Crichton just turns away and doesn't really answer her. And they stand there quietly and watch the Drak swarm fly away. A couple little bits of trivia. Apparently, until the Peacekeeper Wars miniseries that ended the series, this was the only episode directed by Brian Henson of the Henson Creature Shop that built all the space Muppets for the show. However, in this episode, they had a CGI version of Rigel where he was walking across the bay into the Drak nest, and that was pretty much the only time that they did that CGI, as it was pretty much expensive and not really worth repeating on the show budget. Also, speaking of show budgets, I guess that terrace set was also the only used in that episode because it caused a bunch of filming problems.
Yeah, I think the CGI comment's kind of funny because can you imagine having to defend that one to the bean counters and be like, hey, look at this great scene we made. It's like 3 seconds of him walking across, and here's how much it costs. That'd be a tough one. So
yeah, and also I guess for the time, I guess this was like the late '90s. CGI wasn't, I guess, as good as it can be now, so it kind of looked a little janky. So he's kind of walking, kind of weird, like waddling almost across the deck.
oh yeah, I'm sure there's high schoolers now that could do that on their personal laptops, but back then this was a pretty expensive deal. So
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably pretty cool back in the late '90s. But so I guess plot wise, I mean, this is kind of your typical, I don't say typical, but like that the trope of the crew encounters a race of aliens or something that takes over the ship. They think it's for evil reasons or bad reasons because bad things are happening, at least to Aeryn anyway. But yeah, really they're nice, or at least not as evil as everybody thinks, and everybody finds out they can work together in the end, and everybody's happy.
yeah, it's your one big misunderstanding. Although I will point out that they shot them with darts at the beginning, so to get their DNA. So there's some ethics questions there about the collecting DNA without permission and stabbing them to do it and all the fun stuff that goes with that. But it, like you said, it's all a misunderstanding in the end, and everybody gets to go their own way happy. And it's a good again reminder that not all aliens are humanoid, and we shouldn't approach. Especially, I think the show's trying to point out we shouldn't approach everything as cookie cutter Earth view, right? So
Yeah, because kind of as we learned earlier, like this side of the universe or galaxy or wherever John went to, they're kind of more, I guess, symbiotic with their world. Like, rather than having a toothbrush to clean your teeth, for example, they have that little, dentic little creature that runs around your mouth and, cleans out your stuff, your bacteria and food particles. So yeah, you can't always judge a book by its cover, so to speak. Just because some alien looks like, a giant space cockroach doesn't mean they're not nice, right?
at least in this universe, yeah.
Right. Although I guess speaking of giant space cockroaches, I don't really get the Drak's life cycle. It just kind of seems weird. Like they're out in space, however long they live, which we don't know. And apparently, in order to reproduce, they need heat, which I guess can't be like a sun because that would burn them up, right? So really, the only way they can reproduce is to get inside passing spaceships, right?
Yeah, and you also can't think very hard about how their actual replication works because they need DNA, but they're trying to make other bugs, not other replicants, humanoid replicants. So what happens to the humanoid replicants after they go out in space? How come they have clothes? The clothes aren't part of your DNA. Last I checked. So and the marks, the paint marks that they replicate later. So there's a little bit of T2000 or the liquid metal Terminator versus
Mhm.
DNA replication that they just kind of play loosey goosey with. And again, it's a TV show. I get that, but it's kind of funny when you kind of approach it and go, well, how did you actually think this works? I'd love to have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's more like they probably should have been like shapeshifters. That probably been an easier sell than the whole get their DNA and replicate. But they can't speak, obviously, 'cause I guess they don't have the translator microbes, so or the knowledge either, really. So they just look good, but they don't do anything, right? So
Yeah, and that kind of brings the question if you were mentioning the Drax life cycle. Is this the first time they've encountered intelligent life, or is this colony at least? Because they seem pretty clueless about how to interact with humans, or I say humans with the life forms aboard Moya. But you would think if they've been replicating Genesis for you know their species history, that this wouldn't be the first time they've gone through this similar encounter.
yeah, or if they this group of Drak, I guess, don't know, or obviously, I guess they come from somewhere. Yeah, whether they have like any kind of memory, or if because the monarch wasn't there, maybe, or they didn't. Because it seems like you should have the monarch hit one of the people with those darts they hit with Zan with, and then she can speak with people, and they can come to start communicating and have a dialogue, which actually worked. Once they could do that, they had a negotiation. Oh, a misunderstanding. Okay, do your thing. Just get it over with. You're hurting one of our crew, rather than the whole let's make non-talking, almost like guards, I guess. They're just kind of standing there trying to help, I guess, increase the heat so they can get things done faster. But they're not really. I guess the drones, right? They're not really doing anything. They can't think for themselves.
Or at least they don't seem to, although they fight for themselves. So, I mean, unless she's controlling the whole thing. There's a lot of unanswered questions, but again, it's a good episode. It's just not a one you want to tear into very much.
Yeah, and really the important bits isn't the plot of the story. It's more like the crew interacting with the Drak, the crew interacting with themselves. The Drak themselves. Yeah, okay, it's a plot device, really.
Plot bugs.
Yeah, right.
Plot.
I guess obviously that's the more interesting part of the story is the crew interacting with themselves, right? So we have pretty much a lot of that, and during the opening, and then once the Drak show up, because we get John and Aeryn, learning more about each other, and yeah, at the end, Aeryn gets over her opinion that humans are useless and should be squashed, as she put it, right?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a constant effort the show goes through is to show the growth and the crew gelling, right? Because you know, as Crichton spends quite a bit of time talking to Zan about, he's got to figure out how to earn the respect of these warriors that he's definitely not one of.
Yeah, and even trying to figure out his environment, because I think he said like it takes him like 10 minutes to figure out how to open a door, right? Because everything in this side of the universe is completely alien. It's organic. The technology is totally different. He doesn't know how anything works. He's at least he can understand people because of the microbes, but other than that, he's just kind of wandering around like, okay, I don't know what any of this stuff does.
Well, and he should be grateful that he can breathe the same air they do. So
Yeah, well,
there's a bonus there. So
yeah. All right, be really, really short series of that.
and or inconvenient for him to have to be in a has environmental suit everywhere they go. So
Hmm. I guess while we're talking about John and Aaron, kind of one of the funny lines when they're in the maintenance bay at the beginning, talking about commandos and how they're this like super force. And Aaron's like, I'm sure your world has no force so ruthless and so disciplined as the commandos. And then John's like, yeah, we call them linebackers or serial killers. Depends on whether they're professional or amateur.
yeah, and I love that line because I was actually wondering which was which.
That's kind of the fun part about Farscape is John keeps throwing out like Earth references that of course nobody's going to get other than the audience, right? The crew won't have a clue what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean I didn't write them down, but there was quite a few other ones as he references characters or movies or anything like that. Almost similar actually to how Star Lord riffs in some of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies later on. For a more modern take on that same idea. So.
Yeah, and then they think he's kind of useless and silly about as much as the Moya crew thinks John's useless and annoying, right? So
Well, if you take a human off of Earth, and we're pretty much silly everywhere we comparatively. So I think that's pretty fair. That's probably
yeah.
accurate. So
And then we have other other interactions. We have Rigel and Zahn or Zan. I keep intermixing the two. I think they call her different. Whoever's calling her calls her different names. Looks like Zan's got that super speed again. Like when she was doing the spirit painting, they like sped up the film. We have her doing it. It's kind of another interesting power, I guess, that she has maybe.
yeah, that's again kind of slowly doling and teasing some of the character powers. They flesh those out kind of as we go, but it's interesting to see each of the characters getting some time to, even if small bits, to show you what they actually do or their species does. You also get the not to tangent off of them, but you get a little bit more on Aeryn and the fact that I don't know if she's specifically cold blooded or just how they can't handle the heat, right? Either way, can't regulate. So you're getting a little bits and pieces of the abilities and weaknesses and strengths of the characters as you go through.
Yeah, like her species doesn't have the temperature regulation, I don't know, gland or gene or whatever. Yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, and we get to see Rigel a little bit, even though it's mostly off screen. Once again, proving that despite the fact that he's kind of a pain in the neck character to most of the crew, when it comes to negotiations, he somehow becomes the successful member of the party. Right? He was the one that went in and he was the one that got thanked at the end by the monarch. So he obviously made an impression somehow.
Yeah, despite Crichton's attempts to be the peacekeeper and so to speak, or the diplomat, which did work a little bit, but yeah, at the end it's like when Rajal talks to the monarch, I guess being his former job as the ruler of his people, that's probably what he's good at, right? Talking, making deals, BSing, schmoozing people. So he managed to get on her good side, and yeah, she's like, I trust him, so whatever he said must have been great.
Yeah, I do think it's funny that mostly happens off screen and on screen. He's not successful at any of that. He was in the cell with that um, other alien earlier, and he just botched all of his negotiations and stuff. But then here again, he's having trouble getting in and is afraid to go in and deal with it. But that off screen, he's completely successful and gets thanked. So I think again, it's kind of funny, but it works. It makes the character successful.
After Zan talks him into it, tries to compare him back to his, Rajal. What would Rajal the First do? So kind of like, nudge him along, like you can do it. Which that's more of like what Zan's becoming like the jack of all trades kind of character, right? She's like a doctor, a scientist, like a mystic priestess with the mystic healing abilities and pain sharing abilities. She's like the ship's counselor. She's telling John, it's okay, you'll figure it out. Time and patience. Don't worry about it. Try to get everybody's good side, and you'll do it.
Yeah, she's definitely got the plot device movement. Anytime they need something special pulled out, she can show an ability to or counsel their way to it. So, and it's nice. It helps keep the crew compact, right? I mean, we're not on a enterprise with thousands of people, so you get to have your select crew, and she's the jack of all trades, as you referenced. So, I think that's a good title.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many characters, and obviously there's needs you have to fill per episode just in general. There's no engineer because it's a living ship, right? So there's no need to have someone doing all the technical stuff because it's all organic, right? You don't have to worry about that.
Right.
And I guess speaking of other creatures, yeah, organic, we do get to see Pilot more in his element. Like we get to see like his, I don't even call it pilot's chamber, wherever he works or lives or is attached to. And it was kind of a cool, set. It's like really large and like impressive looking, and I guess that's like that's the full size of the pilot puppet. Like when Aeryn was there with him, she's standing there and he's this big massive thing like right behind her, right? And that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool because I may be wrong, but I think that's the first time we get to see him with another character in the room with him. And so you get, like you say, you get a sense of scale, but you also get a sense of realness, right? Because for all we know, he could have been 3 inches tall and buried somewhere inside of Moya's circuitry or something. We just, we really didn't have a context for it. But in this scene, we actually get to see Aeryn go in and sit and interact. So, it makes it more of a real place and set piece, So I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, because you kind of see he's actually like he is plugged into Moya literally. Like he's in this like central console and he's got his however many arms. I didn't count them all, but he's got more than a couple little claws, arms, whatever. And yeah, it was really impressive. So obviously we'll get to see more of that chamber, unlike what we said in the trivia, where that one ending observation dome, I guess, didn't work out for whatever reason. So they never showed it again.
Yeah, they scrapped it, moved it to a different TV show, probably.
Yeah, right. Once they learn after they killed the first Drak by accident, I guess there wasn't a lot of killing, obviously. Of this is kind of like your Star Trek episode, where, they're not running around shooting everybody like Battlestar Galactica or killing people. They're learning how to get along with everybody. Not they weren't really a threat after the beginning, so no
Yeah,
point in trying to.
despite having two warriors on the ship, they don't really seem to be fighting a whole lot. It's mostly like you said, the Star Trek methodology of thinking your way out of it, as opposed to the commando methodology of killing everything, except for the commandos, right? The commandos do come in and slaughter quite a few Drak, but
Yeah, I mean,
that
obviously,
keeps them as the bad guy. So
yeah. So and that helps differentiate them from the rest of the crew, right? That's Crichton's selling point. Is like, look, that's not us. We don't want to. We know who you are now. Sorry about the first one. We don't want to hurt you guys. And yeah, managed to get Dargo on board. Aeryn, I guess, was probably becoming out of it because of the heat delirium. But yeah, to at least get Dargo not to like run down the corridor blasting people. So
yeah, he probably would have went straight for the Monarch if he'd had the chance before. So that was a good methodology to keep it moving.
yeah. And even with the commandos themselves, like they don't kill them either. I guess John maybe is trying to bluff them or try to use the duplicates of him from the creatures to his advantage. Of like, hey, look, I can duplicate myself. So to go back and tell your boss Crace that hey, you mess with the wrong species here. Don't come after me or I'll make a million duplicates and overwhelm you, right? But then he's like, yeah, it probably won't work. But
Yeah,
at least it
well,
was an attempt, right?
yeah, because I mean, you get since Crace doesn't know anything about him. I mean, they don't even know what species he is. I might as well take the opportunity and confuse them a little bit and add some extra elements to throw them off.
Of course, then when they say, "Oh, I also saw like 5 Luxons," and it's like okay, well, whatever. But yeah, that's why he probably thinks it won't work. But hey,
Heat delirium, right? I mean,
yeah,
they don't know. So, all right, you want to roll into episode 4?
yeah, like we said, this wasn't really a, I guess, in-depth, meaty episode. So yeah, I think we kind of said all we can probably say about this one.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I enjoyed it. It's the character beats we were there for, not the intensive plot scenario. That was just a platform to tell the story.
Yep, yep. Just learn more about the characters and see them grow and not hate each other as much as they did last episode.
Forward and onward.
Yep.
Season 1, Episode 4, Thrown for a Loss, begins with the crew getting ready to meet with a band of Tavliks, which Crichton keeps referring to as tabloids, which I thought was a funny tabloid reference. Maybe not, but that's where my brain went. They were about getting paid to haul cargo for them. Aeryn doesn't trust them and doesn't want to meet them unarmed. She's kind of gearing up as we kind of approach the meet. They wait for the Tavliks in Moya's main hangar, acting like Rigel is their leader. However, when the Tavliks arrive, they're armed with powerful gauntlet weapons and grab Rigel, making a fight break out. During the fight, Zahn's knocked out, as well as another Tavlik, who, when he becomes unconscious, causes his gauntlet to fall off. Dargo grabs the gauntlet, putting it on, but it doesn't seem to function for him. The Tavliks escape with Rigel in a bag, setting up the plot for moving forward. Pilot can't stop the escaping shuttle, so Dargo, in a fit of rage, says to forget Rigel, it's his own fault he was taken, and orders Pilot to leave orbit. Dargo then throws a large barrel across the bay, shocking the others with his strength. Zahn notices the gauntlet is injecting something into Dargo, who continues to rage and declares that the ship needs a leader, him. The others try to grab Dargo, but he easily throws them all across the bay. Crichton and Aeryn follow Dargo as Zahn tries to revive the unconscious Tavlek. Dargo has figured out the gauntlet and fires an energy blast at Aeryn and Crichton. Aeryn shoots back, but her shot is blocked by the gauntlet, which manifests extra abilities, for shields and all that kind of stuff. The young Tavlek says the gauntlet injects a stimulant, increasing the wearer's strength, but that the Moya's crew are too weak to handle it. The only way it can be removed is when the wearer becomes unconscious. While Dargo threatens to rip off all of Pilot's arms if they don't leave orbit, a transmission is received from Bakesh, the Tavlek leader. He wants his teammate back, plus a hangar full of Purity 9 Corvinium in exchange for Rigel. They have one solar day or they will kill Rigel. The transmission ends. John and Aeryn try to knock out Dargo with the sleep mist Zahn made, but the gauntlet increases the stimulant and the mist doesn't affect him. They wisely retreat, and John has another idea. He has Pilot close Moya's coolant vents, raising pressure within the ship. When Dargo tracks down John and Aeryn, Pilot releases the pressure, causing Moya to shake violently. This causes Dargo to fall and knock himself out. The gauntlet comes off and is picked up by Crichton and Aeryn. The young Tavlek tries to escape, but Zahn overpowers him and locks him in a cell. Meanwhile, down on the planet, Rigel is also in a cell, trapped up to his waist in dried mud, while in an adjacent cell, another creature, Jotheb, next in line of succession to the consortium of Trow, is also a prisoner. Moya's orbit is decaying because the control crystal is missing. It turns out that Rigel stole it to be part of his scepter to appear more important to the Tavleks. Dargo is still sleeping off the stimulant from the gauntlet, so Aeryn tells John to come with her and her prowler down to the planet. John refuses to go, so she punches him, knocking him out, and takes her with him anyway. Down on the planet, John and Aeryn locate a Tavlek hunting party, and Aeryn needs the gauntlet to overpower them. John says she's nuts to use it after what it did to Dargo, but she says he can sedate her when she gets back and remove the gauntlet then. Aeryn quickly deals with the hunting party, but while she's questioning one of them, the others wake up. John tries to use Aeryn's pulse rifle to help out, but he accidentally overloads it, causing it to explode. The Tavleks then flee. Back on Moya, Zahn's Tavlek prisoner is suffering withdrawal symptoms from the gauntlet stimulant. He attacks her, drawing blood, but she easily overpowers him. She mixes a few drops of her blood into a potion and gives it to him, which seems to relieve his withdrawal symptoms. Aeryn refuses to have John use a sedative to remove the gauntlet. When John tries to inject her, she throws him aside easily. However, Dargo finds them and challenges her to hand-to-hand combat. When Aeryn tackles Dargo, Dargo uses his tongue and knocks her unconscious. With Jotheb's help, Rigel gets free of the mud, but he is caught and choked to death by Bakesh. Jotheb revives Rigel, telling Bakesh that his people will pay Rigel's ransom. After Bakesh leaves, Jotheb welcomes Rigel to the consortium of Trow, saying that all of Rigel's subjects are now part of the consortium. But Rigel begins laughing. He tells Jotheb that although he is a Dominar, he was deposed and imprisoned and is now worth nothing. John and Dargo locate Rigel's cell, but he's gone. Jotheb tells them Rigel is being moved to a secure location via shuttle. As they leave, Tavleks find them and attack. Aeryn opens fire, making the Tavleks run for cover. As John and Dargo escape, Dargo is shot in the back by a Tavlek. They make it back to where Aeryn is waiting, and Dargo collapses. Dargo asks them what color the blood is, and it's dark red. Aeryn then suddenly starts pounding Dargo's on the back with her fists. She explains that Dargo's wound isn't cleansed until the blood runs clear. On board Moya, Pilot tells Zahn that Crichton needs her help to scan for the Tavlek shuttle. She lets the Tavlek boy find his own way back to his cell, but he tries to escape instead. Zahn tells Crichton where the shuttle is and then goes to search for the Tavlek. John doesn't have enough time to get to the shuttle unless he uses the gauntlet. Reluctantly, he puts it on, and when it takes effects, he runs off into the jungle. Zahn finds the Tavlek boy preparing a stimulant injection and stops him. He attacks her, and she overpowers him again, and angrily says that she could tear him apart, but she doesn't want to, as he isn't her enemy. The stimulant he's trying to recover from is. John reaches the shuttle and takes out all the Tavleks except for Bakesh. He and Bakesh exchange fire, but John starts to feel weak. The stimulant has run out in the gauntlet. John says Rigel isn't a Dominar, he's an escaped mental patient. Bakesh says Rigel isn't insane. Fine, Rigel's contagious. Ever hear chickenpox? Nope, Bakesh is not buying that either. Finally, Crichton just comes out and says that Rigel is worthless. He's an obnoxious gas bag, and who's going to pay for that? The crew have nothing to offer. Rigel lied to the Tavleks to impress them, and Crichton swears that's the truth. Bakesh says it's been so long since anyone told him the truth that he doesn't recognize it anymore, and releases Rigel. Crichton demands to know where Moya's control crystal is, and Rigel says it's safe and sound, and then sheepishly admits that he swallowed it. Back on board Moya, Aeryn and Dargo wait patiently for Rigel to poop out the crystal. He gives the crystal to Aeryn, promising that he washed it, maybe. Zahn receives a transmission from the Tablet Boy and is disappointed to find out that he is wearing the gauntlet again. My choice, he says. The interesting trivia for this episode was that Jethro was operated by putting a false floor in the cell next to Rigel, and the puppeteer was up to his waist inside of the rig. Crichton makes two mistakes with his pop culture references. The first is the movie where John Wayne played Genghis Khan is actually called The Conqueror, not Genghis Khan. And another where the title of the character in Kung Fu is called Kung Fu rather than Kane. And finally, this episode features one of the first nicknames that Crichton gives to Rigel, Fluffy. According to Ben Browder, it was unscripted and was based on Rigel's eyebrows. So, what'd you think of this episode, Eric?
So, kind of a little bit in the last episode, but more this episode is kind of what I remember most about Farscape. It's like, it's like action, like action comedy. So I love the witty dialogue, like the banter back and forth, between the different crew members, the different like jokes, like how they react to things. But yeah, kind of like I don't remember too much about Farscape, having watched it, now like what, 20 years ago, right? But that's kind of the one thing that's kind of stands out is like this kind of like the template for what I remember the whole the series being like.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting how as we go, now that they've actually got some relationships built and stuff, they can start playing with that a lot more, right? There's a little bit of history between the characters, which there wasn't before, so they can kind of make references. You start getting nicknames, endearing nicknames, not just, insulting nicknames. You start getting more references and trying to educate each other and, more understanding, right? I mean, if you go back to the first episode, would Aeryn have tried to beat the blood clear, or would she just kind of have walked away if Dargo needed help? So we're starting to get a little camaraderie and assistance with each other going, which I think leads to, like you say, a lot more of the snappy dialogue and template to flow.
Yeah, because now like you said, they're becoming more like a crew. They're caring more about each other. Last episode, Dargo and Aeryn kind of didn't really like each other still. Like Dargo's like, yeah, she's gonna die, whatever, that's great, who cares? And this time around, she's helping him by trying to get his wound cleansed. And then later, when they're both kind of exhausted from the withdrawals from the gauntlet, they're kind of laying there in the grass while Crichton runs away. One of the pieces of dialogue was like, "Who'd have thought there'd be a race more clumsy and pathetic than the Luxons?" Talk about John, and then like Dargo kind of like drops Aeryn to the ground. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. You know how clumsy we Luxons can be."
Right, yeah. That's a twofer, right? Because not only does she get to insult humans and John specifically, he also gets a dig in at Dargo, who gets his revenge immediately after. So it's kind of a nice back and forth.
Yeah, it's more playful this time than like mean spirited, right? It's
Oh
kind
yeah,
of like now it's becoming like what I remember the show being like. The crew's tight together. They have like experience like past experiences. They're playful, sniping one another. Not really insulting, but just kind of like wisecracking with each other.
yeah. I mean, obviously, in these type of shows, it's kind of hard to judge how much time passes between episodes. We don't know how long they've been together specifically, but there's definitely growth as they develop history. So it's kind of cool. And this is the episode. I think I was mixing it up a little bit earlier, where I remembered a lot more of Rigel getting his negotiations in, right? Because he completely snows the his next door cellmate there until he ends up saving him before he gets to laugh at him for the fact that he's completely worthless. So helping him does not get him the subjects that they wanted.
Yeah, because even Rajo manages to bluff Bakesh. Obviously he thought he was worth something. That's why they stole him, right? And then I guess Rajel's so annoyed Bekish anyway that Bekish just didn't care about getting the reward or the ransom. Yeah, he winds up killing him anyway. And then when Jotha brings him back to life, he's like, okay, well now I brought you back to life. Now all your wealth and riches and people are now part of my
Consortium.
consortium. Yeah, he's like, not necessarily.
Yeah. Good luck with that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and even after that, I guess Jotham still, I guess, likes Rigel in some respects because when John and Dargo show up, he's not like, yeah, he went somewhere, I don't care, I don't know. So, he at least tells them truthfully what happened and where he went, right? So he must
Well,
not exactly hate him, right?
right. He probably earned a little bit of respect there because while Jotham was out of his what he thought his reward was going to be, he probably has respect for somebody who was able to pull one over on him. So that was my read anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, because his people were going to pay his ransom, so he had no real, I guess, skin in the game, so to speak. He didn't really care, I guess, what happened to Rigel, but I guess they formed some kind of friendship or bond. I guess as captured rulers, even an ex-ruler, still a ruler, right? So
Yardstick? I don't know, something like that.
yeah, right. And yeah, I mean, they do a good job, like not showing too much of Jotham, right? I guess you can't have these complicated puppets like Pilot and Rigel in every episode for alien races, right? So what they did with the budget, they kind of kept them pretty much secluded behind the partition between the cells and had like different effects where they kind of hide them from it. So
Yeah. Although, and I think that's part of what I'm enjoying about watching the shows. I miss some of the practical effects. Are they less realistic than our super CGI ones? Probably. But it's kind of cool to go back and watch some of the old school practical effects of letting your imagination do some of the work.
yeah, that's before everything became CGI, and like nowadays, like I heard the Disney Plus Marvel series episodes could cost like 15 to 20 million dollars, right? That would probably be like the entire season of Farscape in 1999, right? So
Right.
yeah,
Well, yeah. I mean, just look at I forget what they call the facility, but they use the 360 screens that they use to record all those shows. And, this show is just all traditional. So it's kind of cool.
yep, and with the puppet experience of the Henson Puppet Shop, right? They can make good stuff relatively quickly, right? So it's just a matter of doing it on budget and with what you got to do to make it not look like here's the strings with the puppet, right? So
Well, and not to cross the franchises, but you know, even today, if you ask most fans what would they want, do they want the traditional Yoda Muppet, or do they want the CGI Yoda from the prequels, if those actually existed? Then I think most of us would say we preferred the Muppet, right? So it's part of it's just the endearing history of it, but part of it's the feel.
and Rigel's becoming your little schmoozy, he's like what we said before, like the diplomat, the face, the fast talker, even when John's trying to bluff Bakesh, he's like, oh yeah, no, he's crazy. He's like, yes, yes, I am. I'm. And then he keeps kicking him, and no, he's sick. He's yes, yes, I'm unloved. I'm unwanted. Kick, unconscious.
Right?
And then yeah, with him and Rigel at the end, it's like, where's the crystal? I knew that's why you but only would come back for me. You didn't care about me. All you want's the crystal. It's like, where is it? You swallowed it, didn't you? That's
Mm-hmm.
yes, that's the only way you come back for me.
Well, and that's totally in character, right? What would he do to protect himself? Well, you're either going to gut me or you're going to take me back, and he, was pretty sure he'd get taken back. So
Yeah, I mean, he's like the smallest of them all, right? So he's got to do whatever he can do to keep his worth and keep them wanting him around, right? If they don't think they like him, if he's just there, being annoying and get everybody into trouble, and then he's gonna have some leverage, right? I guess going back to one of the main themes, I guess, of this episode, if you want to call it a theme, I guess, is I guess this gauntlet that they're all using, which is a kind of like a narcotic, more or less, right? It makes the user want it more and more. You know, you get withdrawal symptoms, cravings. You tend to kind of do whatever you got to do to get the gauntlet again, and that kind of plays out between Zan, the tablet kid, and even the rest of the crew, right? So as they go through their kind of experiences with it, like, Dargo, becomes more aggressive. He's like, you guys are all idiots. I'm the leader. No more committee. Aeryn's
yeah,
basically like the super soldier. She's just out there like, this is great. I can, take them all out. And then John's like, oh, this is fantastic. I love it. This is great.
which is an interesting approach, right? Because and this was we do these plots even to this day, but this felt really 90s to me, I guess, when we were doing all the. It seemed like every show had to have an addiction episode of some kind.
Right.
But at the same time, this was an interesting take on it because most of those shows don't make it a point to pass that narcotic around to all of your main characters. I realize there was a couple that were excluded, but three of the main characters each passed it around at different times. And while they each suffered a side effect, it did help them in that situation and was presented as the solution. And then, of course, at the end of the episode, we find out that the child did choose to go back to it, which I thought was another interesting thing that you don't usually see in addiction episodes, right? They like to end on a happy note or at least a resolution note. And the resolution in this case was a relapse.
Yeah, because even though, as we learn, more of Zan's many, jack of all trades is, she's also like apparently a molecular chemist, right? Like she managed to synthesize between her blood and this potion a way to like get rid of the withdrawal symptoms, which I guess maybe is only temporary, right? Because he went right back to it, or later he tried to escape and inject himself with it. Versus the crew, I guess. I guess she's going to help them later, right? probably off camera, get with
Yeah,
handle their withdrawal symptoms, right? I'm guessing.
and we hope that their short-term use won't be nearly as troublesome as his long-term use. I mean, I guess yeah, their culture is presented as though they put it on as a child, early youth. They're constantly using it, so it's a long-term addiction versus the
Hmm.
short-term use, which it's still bad, but at least you hope that it's more easily to recover from. I think is what they'll leave it for. I'd be surprised if they mention it again, but
Yeah, I mean, there's probably not. I know this was kind of the beginnings of the serialized, television stories, like DS9. Kind of did a lot of that in the sci-fi genre about the same time. So, but yeah, they're probably not gonna really mention it much after this. Plus, it kind of seemed like, yeah, to your point, they only used it for like what 20, 30 minutes a piece. So maybe it's not that big a deal. It just seemed like, Dargo was really tired. It wasn't like he was wanting to grab the gauntlet again afterwards, right? So,
no,
yeah.
I think they each had their fill of it. So
Yeah. So this was their, anti-drug episode, right? Just say no to gauntlets, right? So,
yeah, I mean, like I said, very '90s feeling, but it kind of they did a good job with it. They did make some
mhm.
interesting choices that you didn't see in a lot of these shows. So
And we do get a little more, along with that whole drug scene, like I said, with Zahn and the kid, that we keep seeing more and more of Zan. Like she keeps being more like the surprising character, I guess, of all of them, right? John's not one. I don't say they're all one note, but they have their basic kind of things. Like Aeryn and Dargo are the warriors. They have that mentality of like shoot first, ask questions later. They are kind of evolving a little bit. But Zan continues to be like this kind of like every character, right? She's like I said before, like the chemist, the doctor, the counselor. Here, apparently, as this kid keeps trying to attack her or try to escape, she just keeps like basically like, throwing him to the ground, locking him up. She pretty much just keeps overpowering him at will, like he's nothing, right? Even to the point, I guess the last time he tried to escape, actually tried to hit like attack her. She basically shows up against the console and it's like, gets like really mean and mad, like I could like rip your arms off, but I'm not going to because you're not the enemy, right?
yeah, and it's an interesting point because she's also the character I feel we know the least about, right? I mean, in each of their if you want to classify them, right? You've got the scientist in Crichton, you've got the military warrior in Aeryn, you've got the warrior culture in Diago, but you've got and Rigel is a rich ex ruler, but for Zahn you get anarchist. Well, what does that mean? And priest. So you got a contradiction. You got an anarchist priest that you don't understand what that means or how it works in her culture. So it's mysterious that they can kind of do whatever they want with it at any point.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes you wonder, or at least makes me think, maybe was she an anarchist before she became a priest? Because was she more like violent and ruthless, and then for whatever happened, then she became more like this peaceful, contemplative. When she's telling Crichton before, you just need time and patience. Time and patience will solve everything. That's the answer to everything. So is this? I'm curious to see how they flesh out this her past more. Like, is it she's a priest but suppressing her violent side, or she was violent and then became a priest?
Or do they? Is she just a mystery through the whole show? I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, that's the fun. We're only episode 4, right? We got
That's right.
dozens more episodes to go. So
Yep. And speaking of that, coming up next, I guess, is episode 5, Back to the Future, and 6, Thank God It's Friday again.
yeah, which the way these two episodes, at least title wise, it kind of seems like both of them might be like the same, either like time travel-y or flashbacky kind of stories. I'm kind of curious since they filmed them. Obviously, this is the order again, the production order, so they filmed them in this order. I'm kind of curious if it's like the same. I'm sure it can't be the same script or same idea, right? Of like time travel or flashbacks or something, right? But
Yeah, today, just going off the title, today you would consider that a two-parter, right? Because it sounds like one would be the setup and one would be the resolution again. But given that this was late '90s, early 2000, probably not, right? It's probably separated. So you're right. That's an interesting pairing.
yeah, which I guess we'll find out next time, right? We don't know because I never saw season 1 and you can't remember it, so who knows? We could
Oh,
be both right.
I've not seen any of them, so this is all new to me.
All right, so yeah, that's your homework next time. According to Wikipedia, season 1, episode 5 and 6. So until then, we'll see you next time.